Have you ever wondered what it would be like to live in a community of shared values? Well, in my recent trip to the United States of America, I was lucky enough to spend a little bit over a week, including the 4th of July for the 250th anniversary of America's founding, in the Free State of New Hampshire, where for the last 20 years there's been a concentrated migration strategy by libertarian activists seeking to influence the local state Republican Party and local state politics to create a libertarian homeland where they can create and thrive in a libertarian society. So is this working? What does a sort of Republican Party takeover libertarian state look like? Stay tuned and watch the video that follows to find out more. If you've got the time and you want to watch the whole video, that's great. Don't let the length of the video scare you. If you want to jump ahead or just go to particular interviews or break it down into chunks, you can do that using the chapter bookmarks below. So look, I hope that you guys get something out of it. It was an incredible experience for me and I learned a lot. I've got a lot more questions to ask and I'm definitely going to be back. So please, as always, if you like this kind of content, subscribe to the channel, send this video to someone who might enjoy it, and leave a comment below. Hey guys, it's me again. I'm at the Quill, which is the oldest Liberty clubhouse in the world and certainly in New Hampshire as well. You can see they're very organised here behind us, which is always dangerous. You should be worried when libertarians get organised. And I'm going to be chatting to a couple of great Free State people today. I'm going to be chatting with Carla Gericke, the head of the Free State Project. I'm going to be chatting with former Senator Brakey from Maine originally. And I'm also going to be chatting with a current and soon to be retiring state representative, Mark Warden. So hopefully you enjoy all of those conversations and I'll look forward to keeping you updated about my adventures. Hey guys, it's me again. I'm here at the Quill Liberty Clubhouse in the Free State of New Hampshire. Today's day 3 of my adventures and I've just had a really wonderful lunch with a bunch of people involved in the leadership of the Free State movement, one of whom is Carla Gericke, who is the director, is that right?
I actually am now formally retired, so I am president emeritus.
Oh, very good. Excellent. Well, in any event, Carla is very well placed to answer some of our questions about the Free State movement and some stuff that might not be obvious from the outside. So tell me, for people who have no idea, like they've never heard the Free State concept before, what is the Free State Project?
So the Free State Project is a geopolitical movement that is concentrating libertarians and liberty lovers in the great state of New Hampshire.
That was a very concise answer, and Carla had just been finishing telling me she was going to be hard to keep on track, so we're doing well. So basically, it's kind of, if you had to give a comparison to people, it's a little bit like how Utah is broadly considered to be a Mormon state because of the amount of Mormons who live there. So the Free State Project is basically about inbound libertarian migration to concentrate and enter a state that already is quite pro-liberty. What was the rationale behind choosing the Free State of New Hampshire?
So of course, our slogan is live free or die.
I love that. And you see that on the license plates. It's actually awesome. You're just driving around, you've got live free or die in your front.
And the full quote by General Stark was, live free or die, death is not the worst of evils. And so it's a warning about if we don't claim and keep our liberties, we will lose them.
I'll definitely take a photo. There's a beautiful photo of that on the wall that I'll get my editor to put in here so you can see the full quote. But yeah, you're right. There are definitely things worse than living in slavery. So
right. So we came to a state that already embraces rugged individualism. So in addition to it being a geopolitical movement, in many ways it's a cultural movement as well. And to your point about the Mormons, I think also the Amish is a good example to look at. So the idea is to really come and to be reinforcement for the culture we already find here.
Yeah, well, everyone here's been super friendly, and I've already been asked a couple of times whether I'm here to visit or here to stay with a hopeful lilt of people like you to stay.
Your girlfriend might not like this, but we could probably find you a lady to marry.
Well, she definitely won't. We might or might not edit that out, but no, I've definitely got my own lady to bring with me. But so basically, the Free State Project itself as an organisation is kind of shepherding and helping develop and grow the Free State Project. Is that kind of an accurate So the Free State Project itself is like an entity, like a corporate entity.
Yeah, so the Free State Project is a 501c3 educational nonprofit. So really the organization itself talks about the New Hampshire advantage, the fact that we have low taxes, that we have this sort of rugged individualism, that this is a good place to call home if you are interested in liberty and interested in living a liberty-forward life, right? Because with personal freedom comes personal responsibility. So it's not everyone's cup of tea as well. So I forgot the question.
That's all right, because you gave a great answer. And I think I often like to say, and people who follow my channels might have heard me say this before, that libertarianism, and for me, anarcho-libertarianism, is all about voluntarily assumed obligation. Freedom isn't what can I do, what am I entitled to do, it's what do I freely take on as an obligation and as a responsibility. So I think it's a nice way to think about it. I think as I've gotten older, that's been more clear to me that, you know, it's like for us to live in a world where the values we want are protected and reinforced, we need to be thinking about what can we give, not what can we take.
Right, and I think freedom is actually embodiment, right? Like we can't just have these ideas. We actually need to be aligned between our thoughts, our words, our deeds, because we need to be the example that's showing up and saying, this is why you can have freedom, because you exert your own discipline in order to function exemplarily in the world.
People are going to think this is a scripted interview, because that segues really well into my next question, which is like, so on the ground, one of the things I've been super impressed by when I'm here is you look at the Liberty calendar, you look at how many events and things like that are on every day. I'd love for my viewers to just hear a little bit more about the sorts of the community on the ground, you know, what sorts of events, what sorts of interests, all that sort of thing. What's the actual day-to-day real life on the Free State look like?
So we are standing right here in the Quill, which is our oldest Libertarian clubhouse. It was started in 2010. I live half a mile from here. My life is feeding my chickens in the morning and then, you know, exercising and then getting my day on the road, which includes being a real estate agent and trying to bring more people home. Events that happen is hundreds. I mean, it's hundreds, right? You can go to the calendar now and just see. It is stuff from homeschooling, unschooling, mother co-ops getting together and doing things. There is a knitting group. There is a shooting group.
Farmers markets.
There's a farmers market. There's a ruck. There's a...
I feel a little bit like if you've ever gone on a cruise, viewer, where there's like this itinerary of all these things you've got to choose between things and you've got massive FOMO. That's how I feel being here. Like there's so many different things, it's almost overwhelming.
Yeah, and so, you know, at some stage you're a new mover, you kind of dive in, and then it becomes your regular life. And then you know you're surrounded with people who share your values and who will step up and come have your back when it matters.
So just a couple of quick things, some top sort of liberty things that people who live here like Carla might not even think about, but that I've been shocked by. So no seatbelts required. You can still, of course, choose to wear seatbelts if you want to.
Please do.
Permitless open carry, concealed carry, no state income tax, like all of these things are just incredible. And I think people often, especially from Australia, they think of New Hampshire just by what they see at the federal presidential elections, which is usually a blue senator or two being sent to Washington by New Hampshire, and they have no idea that it's like this like libertarian oasis in the middle of statist New England. So I've been super excited by what I've seen here already. I'm hoping to show you guys a lot more and bring you a lot more awesome conversations. Thank you so much for making me feel welcome, Carla, and I hope that you know, the next 3 or 4 years my journey might take me here as well.
I can't wait to see you here permanently in the Free State, and then meanwhile have a fantastic tour. As I like to say, in New Hampshire we can live free and thrive.
Excellent. Thank you so much, Carla.
Thanks.
Well, guys, I'm here at the Quill, as you know, the oldest libertarian clubhouse in the world and in New Hampshire, and I'm here with a very special guest, Mark Warden, who is a state congressman here in New Hampshire, or actually maybe officially retired now, or not recontesting.
I'm still officially, I have the license plates for the next 4 months. I'm in office until the next election.
Well, the license plates are the main thing, that's for sure.
Oh, yeah.
So you're someone who is a member of the state lower house of New Hampshire.
Yes.
Tell us a little bit before we get into that about what your background was before getting involved in state politics.
Sure, be glad to. I moved to New Hampshire back in 2007. Prior to that, I lived in Las Vegas, Nevada. And I was involved in real estate business out there. And a funny story for me is the reason I first got involved in politics was when I went from being a W-2 or a regular employee where they take out taxes every 2 weeks from your paycheck, to becoming what's called an independent contractor.
Yes, where that's a similar thing. You've got to pay your own tax.
You pay your own tax.
And then suddenly you realize, and you're like, oh no.
And yeah, so finally it was a big aha moment. I said, oh my gosh, first of all, where's all that money going? It made me start thinking about the taxes and how injurious they were and how bad they were overall. So that's when I started getting involved a little bit in politics, originally just as kind of more on the tax and spend side on economic freedom. And I discovered libertarianism back then in around the year 2000. And you know how it goes slowly and then fast. And I got into libertarianism. I actually
the accelerationist stuff is real for sure.
Real.
I went from being kind of probably a neocon in the early days of the Iraq War and stuff. WikiLeaks kind of got me on the path of more libertarian. I would say classical liberal for a while. Then I was libertarian. Then I'm like, you know.
So similar pathway for me. And I got involved a little bit in politics out there. First at the Libertarian Party and realized that was just leading nowhere. So I quickly changed the Republican Party. But still found I was a little bit too pro-liberty for them. And then I discovered the Free State Project. And that idea really inspired me. It really spoke to me. And I thought that was truly the best chance at liberty in our lifetime. Moved to the Free State of New Hampshire because of the Free State Project in 2007. And built a business here. And then I got involved in politics here.
And so the business, just before we go on to that, the business is a great business if you're in a movement which is all about people moving to New Hampshire.
That's
because
right.
You have an excellent business model for that, which is that you have Porcupine Real Estate, right?
Porcupine Real Estate, we specialize in residential real estate. And we're a boutique firm that really concentrates on helping Free Staters, Libertarians, ANCAPs, anybody who wants smaller government and less government intervention in lives. We help them find property.
Well, I've already experienced the excellent work of Britt Peng, who is one of your team this morning. She was awesome, showed me a lot of great places. There'll be more on that later on the channel. And the first thing I noticed when I was actually looking for the building this morning that I thought, I'm in the right place, was we accept Bitcoin here. So,
yeah, I was the first real estate broker in New Hampshire to transact a property sale for Bitcoin.
That's
so
awesome.
We got a buyer that would pay for it and a seller that would accept it. So we closed the deal without using U.S. dollars or fiat. It was really a milestone. I think a few people in Miami had done it previous to that, but this was back in 2017, still fairly early in the game. So we made history with that. We've since done a number of similar transactions.
Yeah, that's fantastic. So you were in the commercial space here in New Hampshire for a while, building your business, and then you decided to get involved in state politics in the lower house. Now, tell me a little bit, because you gave me the numbers on this earlier when we were having lunch, and I was just shocked. I'm sure Australians would be absolutely shocked to hear this as well. How many people are in the State Congress lower house in New Hampshire, and how many voters per state rep? Like, how big is your electorate, your constituency?
Sure. Here in New Hampshire, it's called the House of Representatives.
Yes.
It's not that way in every state. Yeah. Some states call it the Assembly.
Okay.
Here in New Hampshire's House of Representatives, there are 400 of us.
Wow.
This is truly the people's house. We like to say it's a volunteer legislature.
Yeah, so it's something like $100 a year, isn't it? That's the stipend, and that's awesome. I think if we paid our state politicians less and they had to be real people that had to have some means of supporting themselves, we would see an instant improvement in quality. But
so most of the representatives are retired or self-employed or have some way to work it out 1 or 2 days a week.
I saw there was a couple of libertarian students from UNH who are state reps. Is that right?
Yes.
Yeah, that's awesome.
We have some people that are 19, 20 years old, and we have some that are 80 years old. So it's a real nice mix. You have people from all sorts of backgrounds, all sorts of professional disciplines and industries, which helps you when you're working on committees for certain types of legislation rather that would affect certain businesses.
Yeah, who would have thought real people being politicians rather than it being a career where people just can do nothing else except exist in that ecosystem? Who would have thought? I don't know. Now, how many people do you represent? What's your electorate size here in Manchester?
We like to say we're the most representative governmental body in the world, and each state rep, there are 400 of us, will represent around 3,400 people. Let's say the population of the state is 1.4 million.
Yes.
And that averages out to 3,300 to 3,400 persons per rep. And of course, some of those are children who don't even vote. So yeah, and we bump into constituents all the time, as you can imagine, at the grocery store, at the gym. It's hard to hide.
Yeah,
everyone knows who you are and where you are.
Yeah, that's great. And I think that level of visibility and accountability is just awesome. I'm smiling, as you can see, thinking about it. So what was your experience? So you are a state rep within the Republican Party.
Yes.
But my understanding is here in New Hampshire, the Liberty Caucus within the Republican Party is quite influential compared to other places.
It is. And in general, the Republican Party in New Hampshire was fairly receptive to us let's call them Free Staters or Liberty folks. We consider ourselves Ron Paul Republicans.
Yes.
And early on, we started running and winning and joined the caucus. They knew that, yeah, we're kind of crazy libertarians, but we agreed on 80 to 90% of the stuff, especially on fiscal and economic issues. So they quickly took us in, and that's been really heartwarming actually to see that. And over the years, we've become more and more of a more powerful caucus within the Republican Party as we've gained leadership positions and greater numbers.
I can imagine if it's anything like Australia, where our Liberal Party, classical Liberal, confusing for those American viewers, but like they're quite desiccated, low energy, not a super high amount of volunteers and activism. But so I can tell it would be a big influx of those things. They would see that as a valuable thing.
Oh, it's huge. And besides the Free Staters that moved here to the state, there are, of course, a lot of natives, locals, people who've been in New Hampshire most of their lives who have very similar principles and same attitude towards smaller government. And, that's been able to sort of double our effect, double our numbers effectively in what we're doing in the State House.
Yeah, that's great. And we talked to Carla a little bit earlier about how New Hampshire was selected because it sort of had the best cultural fit for libertarianism. Yes. So your ideas have found a home here that's quite natural, which is awesome.
Now, for your viewers back home, it's not a purely Republican state. There are 400 of us, and right now the Republicans have a slight majority. Let's call it 220 to 180.
Okay.
Right, so it's not overwhelming.
Yes.
But of that 220, there are 80 or 90 of us, some would say 100, who are small L libertarian.
Yes.
So, almost 50% of the entire caucus is made up of our Freedom Caucus. So that's why we hit above our weight.
Yeah, that's really cool. Well, I've already seen a lot of the effects of that while I'm here. Just quickly before we finish up, what's your life post-politics going to look like?
I'm really looking forward to it. I'm finishing up my 5th term in the House. That's 10 years. And I just retired from the real estate business. So I'm going to be doing a lot more traveling. Who knows, maybe I'll make it down under to Australia before it totally locks down.
I was going to say, get in before it goes to complete hell in a handbasket. It's on its way, but it is a beautiful country just with some really poor leaders and bad decisions being made. But.
So I'll be traveling a lot. I also do some volunteer work for the Free State Project and some other things around the state that really interest me. So I'll find plenty to do.
No doubt at all. Well, I'll put a photo. I'll get my editor to put a photo in here of your campaign sign, which is very, very libertarian. And it was awesome to meet you. And I wish you every success in your retirement.
Thank you very much.
So guys, I'm here for another interview with some of the leadership of the Free State Project here in New Hampshire. And I'm really pleased to be able to meet in person and have joined me Brakey, what's your actual role within the Free State Project now?
So I'm the executive director of the Free State Project, which means I run the day-to-day of the organization, coordinating volunteer teams as we kind of execute what I call our 5-stage pipeline. We promote, we outreach, we invite, we welcome, and we engage with people every step of the journey, from out there in the Liberty diaspora, like you are right now in Australia, libertarians scattered without any particular concentration around the world. And we outreach to them, we invite them to come and visit for events, like we have all the time going on our New Hampshire Liberty calendar. And when they sign our statement of intent and they're ready to make the move, we try to help them through that process until they're ready to build cool works when they get here.
So I've been trying to sort of go a little bit backwards to start with to get people's story, I guess, of how they came to be here. Now, I know your story certainly doesn't start here, but I'm aware you used to be a state senator for Maine. That's pretty awesome achievement.
Yeah. If I could give you the Cliff Notes version, I really got started on the Ron Paul campaign in 2012. I was a grassroots activist in New York City. Working fresh out of college. I was working as a professional actor there, and I got involved with the grassroots movement there. That led to a job on the Ron Paul campaign, where I went home to Maine, where my family's been for 10 generations. I became the state director for Maine. There was actually for those who followed the history back then, there was a huge fight over Maine between the Republican establishment and the Ron Paul movement, a huge fight that broke out at the Republican National Convention, where me and some others were kicked out as delegates of that convention because we weren't supporting Mitt Romney.
But well, my followers back in Australia will chuckle at that because I have a tendency to gravitate towards these kinds of people. I'm currently in a similar position with my state division in Victoria. But anyway, yes.
So I some people got discouraged by what happened in 2012, but I kind of took the. I just remember Obi-Wan Kenobi saying, "Strike me down now, I will arise more powerful than you can possibly imagine." So
there's another saying I really like, which is that sometimes you just have to outlive your enemies.
Oh yeah, and keep showing up. Showing up is half the battle. So I ran for state senate 2 years later. I was at the age of 25. I took out a 36-year Democrat incumbent in an 18-point landslide in a race nobody predicted I was going to win, and became the youngest state senator in the country. Over the course of the next 10 years, I served 3 terms in the state senate. I also made 2 runs for federal office. I was the Republican nominee in Maine for the United States Senate against in 2018 against a guy who's still there, Angus King. Also made a run for Congress. Things I'm known for during my time in the state Senate, despite being, one of the only, I'd say one of the few kind of real liberty voices in the state Senate. We had a number of good people in the House, but I was kind of the lone voice in the Senate while I was there. I managed to get past the state's constitutional carry law for Second Amendment rights. I overhauled the state's entire medical cannabis program, made, I think, one of the most free market medical cannabis programs in the world, which is still functioning very well today. Passed the region's first right to try law for terminally ill patients to be able to try non-FDA approved medications. Yeah. Also did a lot of work on welfare reform, trying to bring accountability to these programs. And one of my real favorite things actually was when I got to help a bunch of 6th grade students legalize hedgehogs as pets. That's probably maybe not the most significant one, but that was one of the more fun ones. When kids come to you and they ask not for some status policy, but like they want a little bit of more freedom, I think that has to be nurtured.
Yes, it might have been a prophecy or a sign of what was to come with the Free State porcupines.
Yeah. Well, and hedgehogs and porcupines often get mistaken for each other, at least in emojis, right? There's no porcupine emoji yet. There should be, but so we oftentimes use the hedgehog emoji. But I came to the sad conclusion. I used to think that, when I was more young and naive in my first 2 terms in the Maine Senate, and we were making a lot of progress on a lot of things, I thought, there was a healthy competition going between Maine and New Hampshire who could advance freedom the fastest. But sadly, in 2018, the year I ran for the U.S. Senate, there was a big sweep. Democrats took everything in the state, and the state took a really hard left turn. The state of Maine has fallen. It had been the 25th freest state in the country, right in the middle of the pack on the Freedom of the 50 States Index. Today it's number 43. It's in the bottom 10. I came to the sad conclusion due to, frankly, a lot of shifting demographics in Maine, huge welfare programs that, basically encourage people to move in for free stuff instead of freedom. I became very discouraged that there was any saving Maine at a certain point. And I realized that, looking across the border at New Hampshire, I figured, well, we had a healthy competition, but if you can't beat them, join them. I figured this is the only place in New England where there is a real fortress of freedom that has been built. And it's because of the Free State Project. It's because of the thousands of people who've moved here, not just to live here and like casually vote for liberty, but to get their hands dirty, to knock doors, run for office, to build culture and community, to build festivals, pioneer technologies, all the different ways that people are making their fullest practical efforts towards building a society where the maximum role of government is protecting life, liberty, and property. And so where we are right now in New Hampshire, it's I think we're at a point where it's achieving a real, almost an escape velocity. If we can keep bringing more people in. And
that sense of critical mass.
Right. If we can keep reinforcing the gains that have been made, it's going to be very hard for the progressives who've lost control of this state to reclaim it.
It's a bit like Bitcoin, isn't it? Where it's both the thing itself is becoming more valuable as more people embrace it, but it's also as compared against the fiat, which is devaluing because of inflation at a rate of knots. So it's like both things. It's like New Hampshire is both becoming more free, and it's becoming more free as other states are becoming less free.
Yeah, and that's actually, I think, one of the things that's really worked to New Hampshire's advantage is that it is the only game in town in New England. I mean, you look at other states around New England. Vermont, once upon a time, was the most conservative state in America. Then there was kind of a socialist state project in the 60s and 70s. Socialists moved in, and now it's the state of Bernie Sanders and his brand of socialism. Massachusetts was once upon a time where the Boston Tea Party happened. Now it's like, Elizabeth Warren nanny statism. Maine is sadly falling in a similar direction. But while these states fall, for those in these states who still carry that New England 1776 revolutionary libertarian spirit, New Hampshire is the only game in town. And despite sometimes people's predictions, not just because of the Free State Project, but just generally the reputation that's been built for New Hampshire as the free state, as the #1 freest state in the country, migration into New Hampshire from the surrounding states is making the state more Republican. People oftentimes think, oh no, Massachusetts people moving into New Hampshire
equals blue, yeah.
Right. They think Massachusetts people moving into New Hampshire, it's going to turn blue like Massachusetts, but it's a self-selection.
Yes.
The people who are moving, more often than not, are the people who are choosing New Hampshire because it is the land of freedom. Just like some people go to Texas because of the cultural idea of Texas as like the Lone Star State. Frankly, Texas doesn't live up to its reputation on freedom as much as people like to think it does, but people go there in search of freedom. Well, we're building that reputation here for New Hampshire, only we actually live up to that reputation. And so the more people move here in search of freedom, the more the free state solidifies itself.
Yeah, it's definitely what we would call in Australia a self-sourcing pudding, One of the initiatives that I saw recently pass the State House, although the Senate kind of knocked it on the head or watered it down so much as to be indistinguishable from that, is the Defend the Guard legislation. Yes. My understanding is that passed the State House with some caveats around 5 other states or something signing on. Is that right?
Yeah, and I think that's actually an idea they took from me. I proposed that in Maine several years back, this idea of like a trigger clause, because people are afraid, they don't want
to go it alone.
Right. They're afraid to stand up to the federal government by themselves because of how the federal government might retaliate. The threat is always, they'll cut your funding for this, they'll cut your funding for that, which is really kind of, a sad state of affairs where how dependent the sovereign states are on kind of getting federal funds that they steal from us and they ransom back to us with strings attached. But the Defend the Guard, should I explain it? Do you?
Yeah, briefly. Yeah, I think so. So
basically, under our U.S. Constitution, the state National Guards are, formed out of what's in the Constitution called the state militias. And it says the federal government can call up the state militias under 3 circumstances: to suppress insurrection, repel invasion, or enforce the laws of the Union. Now, when you look at like the wars in the Middle East that have gone on for the last 25 years in Iraq and Afghanistan and Syria, and you can name the countries, about half of troops on the ground have been National Guard troops from the various states, which, let's take Syria for an example. Were we suppressing an insurrection? Actually, the mission was to foment an insurrection. Are we repelling an invasion? Well, we are the invasion. Are we enforcing a law of the Union? There's never been a declaration of war, which is what the Constitution requires. And there's never even been this lesser thing that they try to point to, right, in AUMF, an authorization for the use of force. In fact, they point to the 2001 AUMF about going after Al-Qaeda, which is crazy because, like, in Syria, we literally, like, put Al-Qaeda in charge of the country. So it's like they literally went in there to ally with the people that they passed an AUMF to justify all these undeclared wars against. So Defend the Guard is basically the states standing up and reclaiming their sovereignty and their authority over their National Guard troops, and to say, you must declare war before we will release our National Guard troops to go overseas into these foreign wars. All the only ask is that Congress needs to do their job. If they believe that it is worthy of the cause, is worthy of the price, then they just need to sign their names to it. And that way, if the voters disagree come election season, they can hold them accountable for it. But of course, that's exactly why they don't want to go on record voting for these wars. They want to keep collecting campaign contributions from the military-industrial complex without having to take accountability from their voters for putting our troops in harm's way like this. So Defend the Guard is a way to force the issue.
Yeah, so that passed the lower house but didn't pass the Senate, is that right?
That's right. This is the second time it's passed the New Hampshire House of Representatives. In fact, New Hampshire was the first state where it passed a lower chamber. It has not passed both chambers in any single state in the country so far, but it has a lot of the Pentagon brass worried, which is why they mobilize their like 4-star generals to come out and lobby against it.
Well, it's always a good thing. Anything that, like they said, one metric I always use to determine the worth of something is to see who it worries or upsets. So that's very good.
Who shows up in opposition? That will tell you something.
Yeah, absolutely. So for you now, what advice would you give to anyone in Australia curious about the Free State Project? I guess one question I know people will want me to ask is, can we do this here in Australia? Can we replicate what the Free State is doing? But the reason I haven't been asking that question is because I've come to the conclusion that it's just not possible. There's not enough of a pro-liberty freedom culture to actually pick an area and transplant on and concentrate. It just doesn't exist in the same way that it does here. And the states themselves in Australia are weaker. But there's not that ability to kind of push back against things and build within a bit of a cocoon like it can here.
Yeah, there are a lot of interesting experiments in trying to achieve these like free societies around the world. I know we've got friends involved. I've got friends involved with like the Free Cities Foundation, and I'm actually I'm going down to speak at an event in Prospera in early September. And I think it's great what they're doing around like economic freedom. But what really distinguishes the Free State Project from all these other projects is that we are this is a state with sovereignty. And so like in Prospera, they have all kinds of economic freedom, but they don't have sovereignty, and they're subject to all the same criminal laws of Honduras. So no guns, cannabis is highly criminalized. Whatever people might say about here in New Hampshire, it's decriminalized here. And our guns are, well, we're one of the most pro-Second Amendment states in the country, which might make us one of the most pro-Second Amendment in the world, actually. So having a state with sovereignty means that we have a lot more ability to create our own policies, and also we can fight back and push back and nullify unconstitutional policies from the federal level. So there's a real value prospect in that. Now, I can't speak to the circumstances in Australia. I certainly don't know it like you do, but I would encourage folks, if you're interested, I mean, these are the steps. The steps are to learn, go to our website, fsp.org. You can read up about us, connect with us. When you're on the website, sign up for our weekly email newsletter, which I write every single week. It's the most optimistic libertarian newsletter you will ever read, because we actually have good news to report of victories in the legislature, of events and festivals that are being built that you're invited to come and join us for, of the gnashing of teeth of angry state worshipers who are losing control of their precious institutions as freedom is advancing. So connect with us by signing up for the newsletter. The third step would be to visit, just like you're doing here with us this week. We have events going on all the time. Literally, you could pick any week of the year to come for a visit to New Hampshire. You will find plenty of events going on. And we have a culture that is about welcoming people. So you don't have to worry about showing up to an event and people looking at you, but like, who's this guy, right? No, we are excited when new people show up. So come for a visit, experience what it's like to be a porcupine for a week here with us in New Hampshire. And if you are so convinced and you realize this is the place you want to be, I know immigration challenges can be challenging when you're coming from another country, but if you intend to live here, we also have on our website our statement of intent. You can sign the pledge, just expressing your intent to live in New Hampshire and to make your fullest practical efforts towards building a society where the maximum role of government is protecting life, liberty, and property. Then the fifth step is, you get here. We throw a welcome wagon for you. We help you unload your moving truck into your new home, and we help connect you to engage with the many projects that people are building here. If your interests are in politics, right? People are running for the state legislature, or they're knocking doors, or they're helping out in different ways. If your interests are non-political, maybe you're interested in Bitcoin or rucking groups or Dungeons and Dragons. Like, there are all kinds of groups for all of the.
Been DMing since 2000.
I haven't as. I'm the 3.5 kind of guy.
I play 3.5.
But I have warmed up to 5th edition. Now they're moving on to a new one. I don't know. I don't think they're going to get me on that one. But whatever your interests are, I think one of the really great things about New Hampshire is not just that there's a bunch of libertarians sitting around talking about Murray Rothbard. I mean, there's plenty of that if that's what you're into. But that you get to build community with whatever your interests are, with people who share your fundamental values. Don't hurt people and don't take their stuff. And there is nowhere in the world that you can find the in-person libertarian community like what has been established here in New Hampshire.
That's awesome. And that's a great note to finish on. Thank you so much for your time and for making me feel welcome. And I'm sure there's going to be heaps more adventures. And I'm here for the 4th of July celebration. So even though I know New Hampshire's 250th birthday of liberty happened prior, because it was the first place where the British yoke was thrown off with the Pine Revolution, it's still going to be awesome to be here for America as a federation's 22nd
Isn't that amazing?
birthday.
You get to be in the freest place on planet Earth to celebrate the 250th anniversary of American
That's
independence.
pretty awesome.
The one place where the spirit of 1776 is still a governing philosophy.
More concerningly, the next day I'm going to do a shooting range with a bunch of attorneys, so I'm kind of concerned about the timing of that. I did say to them, is like everyone going to be totally like compass on the 5th of July, but we'll find out. No worries, mate. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And we look forward to talking again soon.
Absolutely.
All right, guys, I'm here with Republican State Representative Jason Osborne. So Jason is the House Majority Leader, is that correct?
Correct.
And hopefully soon, I'm told, he will be the House Speaker, which is a role that is going to be coming up, and that would represent the first time a Free Stater had held that position. Jason, how's it going?
It's going very well. We're in the middle of transitioning between legislative season and campaign season. So we're getting all the candidates ready, and just finished recruiting and signing them all up last week.
And that's for the midterms, which will be held in November this year. Is that correct?
Correct.
So obviously midterms are sometimes a difficult time when you are sort of halfway through a governing term in the federal sense. What's your situation? What's your feeling of how things are here on the ground? What's the current status quo, firstly, and what are you guys hoping to achieve?
Sure, I'm feeling real good about this midterm. It's the second midterm of the current administration, so the second one always tends to have a little less of a backlash than the first one. We also have a very high-profile U.S. Senate race going on this election with John E. Sununu, so a very popular name in this state. It's going to drive a lot of turnout, and hopefully will translate to a lot of down-ballot success for the state-level candidates that I am working for. That's
great. And so I understand, so we've done a couple of interviews so far, one with Mark Warden, who's a fellow state rep. He's, I think, leaving you this term, finishing
Sadly,
up.
Yes.
Yeah, he was great to talk to. I suggested to him he might find retirement hard. He seems like the sort of person who would have to be busy regardless of what he's doing.
I think he's got plenty of things to do.
But he said that you have, at the moment, 220 out of 400 in the House.
Yeah, we started the term with 221. We're probably down to 217 now because, as you might imagine, with so many members, you have resignations and people move. And,
yes.
Thankfully, haven't had anyone die this.
I was thinking that, but I didn't want to say that. So that's good. So of that 220, you would estimate the sort of Freedom Caucus, if you want to call it that, or Liberty Caucus of that Republican Party would be around 90 or so?
It's hard to say. I mean, we all very much row in the same direction. We really only have a handful of maybe 20 representatives out of all of those that really cause us a lot of problem when it comes to getting on the same page. So I like to think of us as a Liberty Caucus as a whole, not as a minority faction.
Yeah, well, it's kind of a situation, I guess, where the Free State Project and the support they've received both from people coming to New Hampshire and from the native Granite Staters has almost created a situation where the Liberty Caucus is almost the establishment within the Republican Party here in New Hampshire now.
Yeah, I think so. I think it took a long time for new people to realize that they shouldn't be trying to change the world and should figure out how to assimilate into the culture, and also for the existing culture to realize that hey, these people aren't coming here to try to change everything, and to invite them to get along and assimilate as well.
So one of the really interesting features of the state legislature here in New Hampshire, as well as being very large, so about 3,300 people per legislator, so it's a very, very small constituency, is also that the stipend is only $100 a year, is my understanding. So what do you do for work when you're not effectively donating a lot of your time to being a state legislator?
Yeah, well, so as you might imagine, with 400 different people, there's a lot of different kinds of folks that come in to the legislature. You get retired people, you get real estate people who are able to choose their own hours. You've got some airline pilots who are able to choose their own hours.
One guy I follow on X, I think Farrington, is a student, is that right?
He just graduated from college, and so I think he's getting into real estate as well. So yeah, you really do have to be either retired or have the kind of work where you can choose your own hours. Got bartenders. Can't even think of all the landscape people.
Yeah, well, it sounds like a very, very, very makeup of people in Australia. A lot of our state legislators are basically like, you know, like farm to table public servants or lawyers or, you know, staffers for politicians. So it's sort of almost this closed ecosystem that just results in really, really banal cookie cutter people. So
Yeah.
it sounds like you don't have that problem.
Yeah, it is always entertaining. Every 2 years, we turn over about a third of our membership. So there's always new people to work with and new people to get to know and try to help them figure out how to be productive.
So what do you think, we'll finish on this, what's the goal in the next 5 years? Where do you think the Free State could be in 5 years' time?
I'm looking forward to, by the time we get to about 2030, that we'll be a solid Republican state. We won't be sending Democrats to Washington anymore. We'll have 2 Republican U.S. senators. We'll have 2 Republican congressmen, and we will have infused our institutions with a lot more choice, competition, and transparency, especially in education and healthcare.
Well, I'm confident that any senators or congressmen that New Hampshire sent as Republicans would be of the Thomas Massey variety based on everything I've seen this week. So, yeah, look, it was fantastic to meet you, and I'm really looking forward to continuing to learn more about the Free State and hopefully spending some more time here in the coming years.
Awesome. Well, great to have you.
Thank you.